Turn to Romans chapter 12. Spending a lot of time in Romans because that's really our foundation. That sets up where we came from, you know, a lot of the background of what Jesus Christ did, and then now you're here. And then Romans chapter 12 starts practical. Okay, now that you're born again, now what? And in verse 1, we're going to start in verse 1. Did you guys have a nice break?
Yeah.
You braked? Okay, good. Chapter 12, verse 1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is reasonable or logical service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We present our bodies a living sacrifice. That doesn't mean we're all going to suffer for Jesus. What it means is we got to live for him. He's done so much for us. We've been loved so much that the logical conclusion is to love him back and to walk. We were formed unto good works. Remember that? So, and it's cool. It's an adventure. It's like God's like, you want to go on an adventure, honey? So we're not conformed to this world. We don't have to, like, I didn't have to believe what my mom said about me. We don't have to believe what the world says about us. You know, middle-aged white man. Ed always like, I'm not a middle-aged white man. Like, you know, or we're old, or we're, I don't know, whatever. The world can be so mean. There's always something that, some way you don't measure up according to the world. But that's not what the Bible says. So we're not conformed to the world. We're not conformed to not being good enough. We're not conformed to not being enough, because we've been made enough. So we're transformed by the renewing of our minds. And what that is just, instead of filling your brain up with what the world says about you, and sometimes what you think about yourself, let's be honest. I can be so hard on myself. Maybe I'm not the only one. I'm probably the only one. Never mind. But we transform ourselves. We start going, well, I could think this way, and go, no, I know you did all this. I know I'm supposed to be your masterpiece, but I think I'd really rather believe that I'm a slug. You can choose to do that. And God will still love you, and he'll still be there for you. But why not have the guts to believe what he says you are? When you look at yourself in the mirror, instead of looking at all your faults and all your this and all your perceived whatevers, you go, you know, he called me a masterpiece. He called me chosen. He called me child of his, beloved child. And start thinking that of yourself. It's just a thought, you know, throwing it out there. Be not conformed, be transformed. And as we do that, we start believing it. And when we start believing it, then we start acting like it. That transformed, it's like metamorphomai, okay, like caterpillar to a butterfly. You've probably heard that before. It's also the same word that was used with Jesus Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration. When God goes, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. He's doing that with us. Why not be transfigured? Why not be transformed? Why not believe who we are? The reality of who we are. That we may put the test. Prove, it's like you buy a horse and you go out and you put it through its paces. Got to put this Christ in us through the paces. Let's see what we can do. Why not? Have fun. What you can prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. For I say through the what? Grace. That's my word. Given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Now, doesn't that sound like a slap down? You know, you're great, be transformed, be all this. Now don't think more highly than you're supposed to think. Does that fit? No, that's but to think soberly. You don't think of yourself. You don't start getting the back to the boasting. Well, God called me, so I'm special. You're not special. You know, I did all this for God. Who are you? More highly than you ought to think. I'm all something and you ain't nothing. More highly than you ought to think, but to think soberly. According as God dealt with every man the measure of faith. And I want to look at that measure here. Let's go to, well, first let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. This is kind of a what it's not. God, this one just gets us. It totally gets us. 2 Corinthians chapter 10. We're to think soberly, like soundly, like you think it through. You got to take the time to think it through, according to God given every man the measure say. So we don't want to get on this whole I'm so high and mighty and it's all about me because I'm doing all this stuff, right? We're here by grace. We're here because God chose to love us. Deserve it or not, we get to be God's masterpieces because of him, not because of us. So we think soberly like that, but it's according to the measure of grace. Chapter 10, it says, verse 12, I love this. For we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves. They're boasting, all right? That commend themselves, but they measure themselves by themselves, and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. We don't look at each other and go, well, I'm better than you, or you're better than me. And so, I'm better than you, so I'm so great, or you're better than me, so I'm a slug. God compares us to a body, which means we have nails and ears and skin and spleens and whatever you are in the body is just what's needed, right? It even talks about that in here, that if you're an ear, you don't compare yourself with an eye, and you're not a big toe, as Dad says. We each have our own part. So we don't start trying to go, well, I'm not like that person, so I'm no good, and nobody wants to be around me. The measure isn't each other. We're not our sufficiency. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians chapter 4. Verse 7 and 8. It says, but to every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Right? That's how we're to think soberly. That's what we're supposed to think of ourselves. And where people get trapped up a lot of time is in their long suits and what they're naturally good at. I've seen people who are just smarter than whips, who are, it's like, okay, God, I got this one because I'm so smart. I can figure this one out. Instead of going, what you've given to me to do is impossible. Like, okay, take care, love this group of believers here, which is, in translation, love these people here who I have picked from before the foundations of the world. They are my beloved kids, my oopsies or whatever. Now you take care of them. No, that's impossible. But with God, it's possible. And we're going to get more into that. But we can't get caught up in what we're good at. Just 5 senses wise. We can't afford to go, nope, I've got this, God. You can watch me do this one because I'm just naturally talented at such and such. Which I'm going to tell my husband. Ed's a physical therapist, right? So he has been trained in physical therapy. He's actually a doctor of physical therapy, which he's also a reverend, so I tell him he's an overachiever. I'm the one in our family who's like the odd man out. Our kids are brilliant. He's a doctor. And then there's me, who I went to high school. So, but anyhow, so there's times where people are like, oh yeah, I've got a hitch in my giddy up, and I'm like, oh my God, you need to go talk to Ed. He'll fix you. Because Ed is really good at what he does. And inevitably, every time I send someone to him, he's like, you want me to pray for you? And that's why he's so good. Is because it's not about all this knowledge he has, it's about God. So when he prays for him, a lot of times he doesn't need to do anything because they've already been taken care of. And if he needs to get in there and do something, it goes really easily because, I woke up a month and a half ago and it was time to get out of bed. We usually get up and we walk for a half an hour. We walk around the house. And I said, honey, I can't move. And he's like, I said, I'm really, really dizzy. I was so dizzy that laying there, if I turned my head like this, the whole room would spin. So he prayed for me, and then he fixed me. And I took the day off, and then I was all better. So, which is really handy to have someone who loves God and who's willing to go by God's strength first. So that's where our strength is having the humility to go, okay, God, how do you want me to handle this? No matter how good we are at things. Because face it, you're all talented. You've all got a lot of strength and a lot of ability. But we're not limited by our strength, and we're not limited by our weakness, which we'll just keep going because that's where we're going to get to. Did I read it 4:4? Yeah. Wherefore he said, when he laid captivity captive, he gave gifts to men. So it's all by grace. Romans chapter 5, Galatians, Corinthians, Romans chapter 5. And in verse 15, it says, but now not as the offense, talking about Adam. Adam blew it. Thank you, Adam. You blew it for all of us. But not as the offense, so is the free gift. For if through the offense of one, many be dead, right? Like all of us, dead in trespasses and sin, much more the what? The what?
Grace.
All right, better. Okay, you guys have to work on that. The grace of God and the gift by
Grace.
Really?
Grace.
The gift by grace. Excellent. Which is by one man, Jesus Christ, has abounded to many. It's gift, it's grace. Verse 16, and not as it was by one that sinned, so is the gift for the judgment that was by one to condemnation, but the free gift is of many offenses unto justification. We're not going to lose it. We're not walking a tightrope, and if we screw up, God, who picked us from before the foundations of the world, whacks us off the side of the head and knocks us off the tightrope to be burning in hell forever. That is not our lives as God's children. Many offenses unto justification. For if by one man's offense death reigned by one, much more they which received abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by Christ. We have been invited to reign in Christ. We are not trodden down poor Christians. I don't care who says what to us about what. I don't care what the circumstances, what the world's climate is about Christianities. And, oh, people don't like us anymore because we're Christians. Who cares? You were chosen from before the foundations of the world. God said we reign in life. So you know what we do? We reign. That's us. That's what we do with our gift. We reign because it's by grace. And because of that, no matter what the situation, whether you already have natural ability, well, you don't have the natural ability, it does not matter. We tap in. I'll tell you here. When Ed and I were young, very young, we were part of an outdoor program. We taught Christians principles by basically torturing them. We would put large backpacks on them, drag them into the middle of nowhere, and make them climb tall mountains. And, not just like hiking around, which we did too, because you had to do that, but also like tying them into ropes and making them climb the side of cliffs. So we did this. Now, personally, I don't like heights. So, which was God's sense of humor. And God has pulled things on me my whole life. It's been fun. I am convinced he has a sense of humor. I'm absolutely convinced because he picked us, right? So, oh my God, I forgot to set the time. Starting my teaching. But one of the things we taught the students is think of the rope like God's grace and God's mercy. God's grace, because you tie in, which when you tie in, it's a commitment. You tie in and you go belay on. And I just got goosebumps. And it means I am going to climb this rock come hell or high water. And it's God's grace because if they were anything like me, there was no way in hell they would go up the side of that cliff any other way. None. I am a very earthbound person. I don't run. I have run, but that's because he can torture me every once in a while. But I've stayed away from it for years, as you can tell. But very earthbound person. But climbing, because I'm in this rope, I've got that grace. I can go places I would never consider going. You tie in, belay on. You got the grace and mercy, because when you're 30 feet up in the air and you screw up, you're not going to go splat, which is really kind of cool, because we have that freedom. And it's interesting climbing, because when you rock climb, I learned that if you stand back and you look at the climb and you go, oh, that looks pretty easy, I can knock this out, is usually when I got my ass handed to me. But when I would take it and I would not try to think all this way in advance, but to try to, hey, what's the next move? What's the next thing I do? And there was a lot of times I had to put everything I had into it to get up 3 inches, or sometimes get up 2 feet if it was a good day. Whatever it was just taking each move as it was, and I would get to the top. Interesting, huh? But you see how that fits with all this? And that's, for me, over the years, has been something that I've held in my mind. That grace, that the times when there's things I would never attempt, I was willing to go, okay, belay on. And do it, because anytime God asks you to do something, it's an invitation. It's not, I'm going to ask you to do something so you could fall on your face. Because I like watching my children fail. It's an invitation. And we're going to get more into that. Romans 11. I better hurry up because I have no idea how far I am. And I'll go to hell if I'm late. And if by grace, then it is no more works. Otherwise, grace is no more grace. Verse 6 of chapter 11. But if it be of works, then it's no more grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. again, just to make sure, in case you hadn't gotten the point, works, grace. Works, grace. Works, bad. Grace, fun. Okay, good. Okay, let's keep going. 2 Corinthians. I am a goof off. That is my long suit in life. I like to goof off. So a lot of the stuff isn't because I have to, it's because I get to, which is a good way of looking at life. Romans chapter 12. Like cooking, I am just having fun. Because I get to feed people, and I'm a Jewish mother at heart, so the more you eat, the happier I am. And I get to play with Colleen, which is great fun. And then I've seen all these little cool things where God pulls stuff off, which is really the fun stuff. When you jump in with both feet, you get to see the cool things. You know, like someone randomly handed me 3 green peppers. I was like, here, this is for you. And I'm like, thank you very much. This is great. I'll take these. And later on, when I was making the hot sauce, I was like, I need green peppers. And I went and looked where the green peppers for the hot sauce were supposed to be. No green peppers. Someone handed me green peppers. Saved, God. That was God right there. And there's so many cool stories. But when you jump in with both feet, you get to see the cool things. And that's where I like to be in the kitchen. That's where we're, licking the batter and having, testing out the cookies and doing all that kind of stuff with God. Why not see that stuff? So for 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. Here. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and in reproaches, in necessities and persecutions and distress for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It's not that we're looking to be persecuted. That is not the point of this verse. It is not a suffer for Jesus mentality. It's in all things we're more than conquerors. It's bring it. We live in a present evil world. Life sometimes sucks. But in everything, when we tap into God, in everything, when we claim with sobriety what God has made us, bring it, because we can do it. That's who we are. That's living in grace. Let's keep going. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Paul's talking to the Corinthians. He says, I've planted, Apollos watered. Who gives the increase? God. We do our part. God does his part. There were times climbing, especially if the Blair was kind, where, it would be a little tight. And there would be times where it was like, when I was pulling up, I could tell the person was right there with me, kind of helping me along, so that anywhere, it was just like, okay, good. God does that with us. There's times where we're just moving and God's going, okay, we're gonna help you along. It's so cool. So God gives the increase, and neither is he that planted anything or he that watereth, no boasting, but God that gives the increase. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man receives his own reward according to his own labor. It's not that the planting guy is all special and the watering guy's not, or vice versa. You each have your passions. We all have our passions. God gives the increase. And we're laborers together with God. You are God's husbandry, you are God's building, according to the grace of God, which is given unto me as a wise master builder. I've laid the foundation, another builds on, but every man take heed how he buildeth thereon. It's like an invitation to be laborers together with God. It's not, well, now that you're born again, we've got you. And now you got to work. And it's, we have an invitation by God to work with him. Like fellow laborers with God. And that he's going to make sure it gets done because he gives the increase. What a promise. What a promise. Because then it's a front row to see all the cool stuff. You know, and that's where it really gets exciting, is when you get to see God work. And the more we get in there and do what God would have us to do, the more of a front row seat we have. You know, it's just, you get to see how the cookies are made. And you get to see God do okay, here's one for you. The children's camp, they were making lemonade this morning. And everything blew up. It just went to hell in a handbasket. The thing they were making to it basically exploded. Lemonade went everywhere. And they're like, oh, great. Not only do we have a mess, we now have no lemonade for the children, and we're going to get eaten. But what was it? Colleen just happened to have 2 cans of lemonade, which was just what they needed, that were left over from yesterday. Surprise, because we're fellow laborers with God, and God's like, I've got this. So, I just think that's so cool, don't you? Yeah. Oh, man. You know, I don't want to just be back there going, I was so unworthy, and life sucks, and I'm barely surviving, and I'm miserable because I'm a Christian. I want to be out front going, bring on what you got, world, because me and God are a majority, and I'm part of a household, and we are going to do what God wants us to do. We are going to live the way God wants us to do. We're going to shine. We're going to show people what it's like to be born again, sons and daughters of God. Because people need us. Oh, man. All right. So let's go to Philippians chapter 2. We'll fill on up on Philippians chapter 2. I love this verse. And this verse, for me, is the belay on. You'll see what I mean. It says, verse 13, for it is God which worketh in you, okay, both to will, and will is a passionate desire. It's thelema is the word. It's to will. It's like when God goes, this is what you need to do. And it's easy to talk yourself out, because a lot of times he's asking you to do the impossible, because he's a God of the impossible. So to will and to do is the energy to do it, the ability to do it. God doesn't just put things on our heart. He gives us the ability to succeed. So for us, it's having the holy boldness, the fearlessness. When God puts something on your heart, when he shows you his vision for himself, when he opens a door, to say belay on. Because it's by God's grace that we can do. Wow. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth us. We do it by soberly putting on the word and realizing that what has been created inside us makes us well able. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Verse 10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, which was bestowed upon, and his grace, which was bestowed upon me, was not in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. You don't have to become somebody else. You don't have to become a level of goodness to walk with God. You don't have to. Now, do we grow? Yes. Do we change? Yes. And we don't have to be afraid of that, because we're not holding on to something like, holding on to a rock in the middle of a river. Our identity is Christ. And we're good enough. We're masterpieces. And so as that, just who you are is just what's needed. Isn't that great? Because that's who God picked, is you. You. Right? For 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And we'll end here. Is that okay? You guys had enough now? And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. And that's my heart for you guys. Bless you.